We're actually completely self-funded. Really the options in how do you get the startup money is either it's debt, which you borrow, or you have a great idea and you sell a portion of that, company or that idea to somebody else, in which case it's equity. So for us, we've always been on the debt path in order to kind of get the infusion of capital to reach the next milestone. So even to this day, yes, we have debt and obligations, but there are no other outside shareholders. So for Stephanie and I, that was a conscious decision. Having said that, I did spend 3 months in Silicon Valley as part of the Canadian Technology Accelerator, and that was put on through Foreign Affairs Canada. Basically, they pick a handful of entrepreneurs, they send you down to the Valley or New York, like Diana went through, and really give you a lot of awesome connections. Had an amazing pitch, and the feedback that I was getting, we were looking at, okay, well, why don't we try to raise $5 million? And the feedback that I was getting was, well, if you've gotten this far, why mess it up? Basically, why bring in some other third party who's now going to try to steer you in a different direction, who's going to be on your case, trying to make decisions for you, who's really not educated? And as much as I kind of, I guess, bare my heart, felt like, as an entrepreneur, you feel like a failure. You didn't raise the capital that you'd set out to do. We're seeing head nods. That I think the truth of the matter is it actually turned out to be a great kind of decision in a certain way. So I'm grateful for kind of how we went about it. So the key is obviously, since we did are taking kind of a debt approach, then make sure you can find it and service the debt commitments that you have. And we've never had an issue with it. So
I guess I'll give you my 2 cents more on the topic, but 6 companies raised angel capital for some, raised institutional capital, didn't raise capital in bootstrap. So I've gone through every single path nearly possible, and raised non-equity financing as well, debt financing as well. And I would say the best possible path, if you have the choice, is to not raise capital if you're able to. And it really depends on what you're looking to build, right? If you're building business consumer software, chances are your capital requirements are going to be a lot lower than if you're going to build a biomedical device, right? Or a drug that's going to require FDA regulations. So really depends on what you're looking for. I'm not going to lie, it's really, really shitty to raise capital in Canada compared to the Bay Area or San Francisco. That said, it's miles better than it was even 3, 4, 5 years ago. Capital has become much more mobile, When I first started, no one in the Bay Area, which is where the vast majority of venture capital resides, would ever invest in anything that was more than a 100-kilometer drive from their offices in Sand Hill Road. Reason is because they get enough deal flow that is of quality, plus they just simply weren't comfortable or had a track record in investing successfully abroad. So why go and hop on a plane to do your board meetings in a company that is maybe marginally better, maybe probably not even better, because they haven't been able to get the comfort of investing in a company that's outside of California. That said, there's been an enormous amount of exits that has happened since, yours included, where Canadian companies have taken either capital from the US and Canada and have shown that we can build global world-class companies. So it's gotten a lot better, but it's still crappy. So if you're looking to build a business-to-consumer company, like say, for example, something that is social networking related or mobile messaging, chances are you're much better off being within a 100-kilometer radius of where Sand Hill Road, which is just in Palo Alto next to Stanford. You're going to get a much higher likelihood of getting the meetings that you need, whether they be planned or unplanned, in order for you to be successful. That said, you can still be successful in Canada, it's just a lot harder. And if you're looking to build a business-to-business technology company, like let's say it's enterprise software, it's storage, or maybe it's even biomedical, it matters a little bit less, but even so, it's usually a lot easier to do in the Bay Area. Now, there are advantages to raising capital in Canada as well. If you're a CCPC or a Canadian-controlled private corporation, there are large benefits to for starting and having the headquarters in Canada. One of the key reasons is because of SR&ED credits, the SR&ED tax credits, which allow you to get 50% or more back for every dollar you spend in R&D. That's enormous. For games, you get 40% back from the OMDC, which is entertainment production tax credit. The cost of living is anywhere between 20 and 30% lower than San Francisco. So your dollars go a lot further. So there's a lot of advantages to headquartering and raising capital in Canada as well. I can go on forever about this, but ultimately there are pros and cons to each one. I think it depends on the type of software, the type of company you're looking to build, and how comfortable you are and your confidence in blowing the doors off of people that you go to the Bay Area by still staying in Canada. Because if you're amazing, then sure, you can even out the advantage that your peers have in the Bay Area. But if you're like an average entrepreneur and you need every advantage you can get, and you're building a business consumer company, you probably want to be in the Bay Area, or at the very least, have dual presence, where your R&D is in Toronto or in Canada with a very significant presence in the Bay Area, so you can attract that capital. Seemingly conflicting pieces of advice really quick on capital raising. Try not to raise capital if you can. Keep your equity as much as possible. If you do raise as much fucking money as you possibly can in one shot.
First time.
Right? Don't worry about dilution. Just take as much money as you can possibly get, so that if you fail the first time, you have money to buffer you to do a pivot or a change in strategy. Okay? And then the third one is, this one I don't know if I should say. If you're raising capital and it's your first time, I would say, I actually meant to say, don't try to pitch. Let other people pitch you. Focus on the product. Focus on building value. Chances are you're building something that doesn't actually need any real capital if you're building a piece of software. I'm assuming you're building a piece of software, chances are you don't need to raise any money. What you may have to do is get creative and give away equity for services, or get really good at convincing your friends to code for you with the hopes that you'll be able to pay them back somehow with beers, nachos, or shares.
I would say it very much depends on what you're doing. I mean, if it's to Talbot's point, if it's a massive, enterprise play that a medical play or something that's out to change an industry or really inform an industry, you're probably going to need more capital than than what's in your bank account or your credit cards. But barring that, if anybody knows, there's Vinod Khosla, who's Khosla Ventures, like a pioneer at Sun Microsystems, just wrote something the other day saying that he was on a panel or something, I don't know. He basically said, VCs are, 90% of them should shut up and they don't know what they're talking about because they've never operationally done something, right?
Or they've done something and they give you bad advice because they try to impose their
sequels on you. They come in and, yeah, exactly. But so the thing is, if you're myself, bootstrapped, two things, ended up with good outcomes, but it's blood, sweat, and tears. And I went from the HBAs and the business guys. I had a job at Accenture for 8 years. I started my entrepreneurial ventures at 30. It was, you started at what, 14? I started at 30. So I had 8 years of working at a massive consulting company, graduated comp sci with the skin of my teeth, and then joined that. And then left and did my entrepreneurial stuff, and I bootstrapped. And I went from over $100,000 a year job to having my last few $1,000 in the bank, newly married with a kid on the way. And that's sweat. Like that
takes balls.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's like, shit, we're doing, you're trying to get money, you're trying to do client work while trying to build a product, and that's, it's hard as hell. And I know a lot of guys start out by starting with a couple of guys doing client work, and that may be great if that's what you want to do, like a professional services company, right? You can grow that, you can, add people and make margins off them. It's a great slave trade. It's terrific. But
talk about the client work versus what did you mean by that? Just
so client work is like you go out and you get like the Wave, and then Wave wants to build an app, and you're building an app for them, and then you also have an idea where you want to do the next great social media application, and they might be unrelated, but you need money over here to fund this one over here. And the challenge is that if you're a small team, how do you dedicate resources to do what you want to do in order to fulfill the obligations that you have to do to get the money? And you can't do it. I mean, it's extremely difficult unless you're in the enviable position where, let's say the Wave is a client of yours and they want a menu ordering application and your idea just happens to be a menu ordering application, so you're basically funding the first version of your product, which is gold. It's difficult. You're not going to be able to do your product and professional services work at the same time. Forget about it. We had to, we ended up just doing one thing and focusing on that and flipping that and putting the money back into another thing, and that's how it rolled. We were able to bootstrap ourselves. Going out of the Valley or Toronto, I echo Albert's statements. The Valley is just a different place. Silicon Valley is, a place unto itself. The serendipitous meetings you have in coffee shops, or you meet a guy who connects you to a guy who connects you to a guy, don't happen anywhere else. That being said, first-time entrepreneur, forget about it. Unless you're, especially in this day and age, if you're worried about raising money versus thinking more about your product and what you want to do, you're not doing the right thing. Don't worry about raising money. Don't worry about dilution. Don't worry about any of the convertible debt. If you're spending all your time thinking about that and you're not spending time building what you should be building, then you're not doing the right thing. That's what I would say.
If you got $1 million for your startup, you would have absolutely no idea what to do with it. You would screw it up. Likely, I started my first company with $1,500. And that money is actually probably still available to you guys. It was through the summer company program. It's available to all students who are returning. It's nothing. I think it was $1,500 at the beginning of the summer. A little bit of mentorship was pretty bad, and then $1,500 at the end. But it was pretty bad. But it was just having that little bit of money and then being able to figure out, like, how do you make $1 first? A lot of people get focused on, like, how do I make 10 million or how do I make 1 million? If you don't know how to make $1, you'll never be able to make $10 or $100 or $1,000, and that is my biggest lesson as an entrepreneur and what I usually coach people on. They're way too grandiose and they don't even know what to do with the money when it arrives.
Would you spend your first $1,500 on it?
Product, like trying to, it was for the beads, so like sourcing materials, like I made all my own mala beads for the first year.
Right.
What else did I spend it on? I had a Facebook page. I sold through Facebook for like 5 months before I was even able to afford a website. And what that did, at the same time, a friend of mine got $16,000 from her dad to start a jewelry company. She never made $1. Mine's still going and it's doing quite well. So just to put in perspective, you probably need a lot less money than you think you need. Secondly, anyone I know who has raised capital successfully, it's taken so much of their energy that they don't know if they would ever do it again. If they had to, like, you might as well take a year of your life and be like, this is going to be the time that I'm going to spend with my potential investors, and you're essentially married. It's very, very challenging. And on the investor side, both Jaffer and I kind of dabble in the investing world. Jaffer, if you don't know, he's an investor in Crunch Fund, as well as myself, an aspiring angel investor. It's really, really hard to get a yes. Like for myself, I've been pitched by hundreds of entrepreneurs and I've not said yes to any of them unless I had a really, really close relationship to. Raising money in Canada is tough. It's not that the money's not out there, but it's, we have resources here. John Pollock is in the audience running Biz Inc. Like, he's actually so amazing. I'm his biggest fan, and he runs Biz Inc. Biz Inc. introduces entrepreneurs to investors. But even still, it's really challenging for an investor to find someone who's really a great fit. They're looking for the best jockey, and usually they're looking for experience. And then a really, really great idea. And again, there's a lot of recycled ideas out there. In the pitches I've heard, I think there's 20 ideas that I ever get pitched on. There's like a dating website, there's like a big data company. What else is there?
We're still doing shots if we say the data.
Oh shoot. Gamification and mobilization data company. There's these like 10 startups that exist out there, and as an investor you kind of hear the same thing and it gets boring. It's really, really hard to kind of find the good ones. When the good ones do come by, you become numb because you've now heard all the good ones that you likely missed the good ones. So it is very challenging. If you can, like, bootstrap, try to do something with nothing. Take that $1,000 or $10,000, kind of go to your friends and family. That's the other thing a lot of investors believe. If you can't get money from friends and family, the people that know you and believe in you, why should they give you money? Yeah, the less money you have, the less expensive the mistakes will be. Like if you had $3,000, you would have learned that with 3,000. If you had 300, you would have learned it with 300. The other thing that I didn't touch on with capital is it's so easy now to either get money from the government through certain grants. I know a guy who I was at CTA in New York with. He got over $1 million worth of grants through different things. He's like an expert grants. And there's also crowdsourcing. As you guys have probably heard of Indiegogo and Kickstarter. We launched a really bad, actually, Indiegogo campaign for our stock company. We made every mistake and we still managed to raise like $42,000. So it's so easy to, test your idea, get out there and raise some kind of capital right off the bat without giving away any equity.